Today's story is all about the Siege of Waterford. Now, we've had many sieges of Waterford throughout our history here. We had the siege by the Normans in 1169 when the city was defended by the Vikings and the Irish, who acted as a combined force. You had a Confederate siege there in the 1600s. You had the siege against Cromwell in 1649. But the siege I'm going to talk about today happened in 1922. On the 6th of December 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed. That was between the Republican forces and the English. On January the 7th, there was a vote taken in the Dáil, either to accept or reject the treaty. And it was accepted, and the vote was 64 for, 57 against. It was very, very, very close, you'll appreciate. However, it was accepted, but it was rejected by most of the IRA, the active soldiers in the field. In Waterford, on February the 8th, 1922, the Devon Regiment, which was more or less the resident British soldiers in the barracks in Waterford, vacated the barracks, and they handed it over to the York and Lancaster Regiment. And they were there for a while, and on March the 9th, 1922, the Lancaster Regiment vacated the barracks and handed the barracks over to three IRA leaders. One was Pax Whalen from Dungarvan, the other was Mick Mansfield from County Waterford, and Jerry Cronin from Waterford City. So these were the three IRA men. In May 1922, Paddy Paul, who had been the officer commanding the Waterford Brigade during the Pickerton ambush in 1921. He had sided with the Free State, and a few other Waterford men sided with the Free State. But Paddy was a senior officer in the Free State, and he came to Waterford to take over the city on behalf of the Free State. And as soon as he arrived at the barracks, he was arrested by Jerry Cronin, the Waterford area man. And Paddy Paul went on hunger strike. He was taken to the infirmary because he was so ill at the time. Now, he had spent 10 days on hunger strike, as I said, and 3 of those days without water. But he was recuperating up in the infirmary when one day he had a visit from some nuns from the local Sisters of Charity, 2 nuns in actual fact. So there was IRA guards on Paddy Paul, and they were very polite to the nuns. They let him in and let him have a little bit of privacy talking. And soon afterwards, the 2 nuns emerged again, and the guard bid him goodbye. When they went back in to check on Paddy Paul, he was gone. He had dressed up as one of the nuns and escaped, leaving a woman behind there who had come in dressed as a nun. So it's a great story and an even better escape. Have a look now at the posts all along the quay is where the IRA was spread out. So we'll just look at a little video of along the quay, and I'll point out the various places where the IRA were. But they were also up on Gray's Dew, and up there because the Free State forces were going to come in. They knew there was only one place to go, and that was on the height of Mount Misery, up there, all along there by the golf links, up all the whole area, from Sally Park right over golf. So here we go, let's go and have a look at the video. Here we are going to look at some of the Republican strongholds along the quay, starting up at the bridge end. So we're moving down. We can see the first one here, this stone building here, is the granary. It used to be the granary. It was a corn store. Alongside of that is the Munster Express. That was another Republican stronghold. And if you can imagine, all along here, it was crowded with people as the fighting was going on. Luckily, nobody was killed. So we're moving down now to another very important one, which is more or less smack centre in the quay, and another very famous Republican stronghold, indeed the birthplace of our patriot Thomas Francis Meagher, and that is the Granville Hotel. We're passing right here now, you can see the name as the Granville Hotel, another Republican stronghold. Again, all these areas here in the centre of the town, heading up towards Barnstrand Street, packed with people on the day the siege started. We're heading down now to the command quarters of the Republicans in Waterford City, headed by Jerry Cronin, and that is the GPO. You can see it here with this beautiful red door we're passing here now. So that's the GPO. That was the main headquarters, as I said, of the Republican movement. Heading down there now again, we're going down towards Reginald's Tower. Now Reginald's Tower, we're very, very lucky to have it. As you will be learning, it was mined by the IRA
and had, except the fact that it was captured during the night, they could have easily exploded the mines, and we wouldn't be looking at this beautiful monument today. We'd be looking at a pile of rubble or something else. So that's the little trip around on the quay. So now two very important hotels that we have to look at. Here we go, the Adelphi Hotel, and at the back of it is the County Club. This is where the first Free State soldiers came and captured it. This is the front of the Adelphi Hotel. Alongside of it was the steamship company. This is the Imperial Hotel.
Now the following was taken from an article that I wrote all about the Siege of Waterford for one of the local newspapers in 1995. So I'm going to have, it's quite detailed, so I'm going to have to read from a lot of it. Now the Siege of Waterford began on a bright Tuesday morning on July the 18th, 1922. The city awoke to the sound of Republicans making themselves busy, speeding up and down the quay, and they are occupying the various places all along the quay, as I've pointed out in the video. The Free State forces had left Kilkenny. They were on their way to Waterford. They stopped in Kilmacow for a break, so to speak, and they received absolution from the chaplain of the De La Salle College. They all made their confession before the attack on Waterford in case they got killed. Some of them did get killed. As I said, the Free State forces were under the command of the Waterford man Paddy Paul and a very, very, very competent and efficient general called General Prout. So the whole place was in a state of readiness, and the bridge was closed. On the Tuesday, that's the day of it, there was an armoured car speeding along the quay with the IRA lads in great humour because they knew the battle was about to start. Didn't know how it was going to go, but they knew it was going to start. They were very joyful because they had been joined by the 1st Cork Brigade, portions of it, to reinforce the Waterford IRA. There was about 300 IRA men against the Free State forces. Many of the local lads were armed only with revolvers. So really, in reality, it wasn't going to look too good. They had also occupied, along with the places on the quay, they had occupied the jail in Ballybricken. They had occupied the barracks in Barrack Street. Now there was 2 barracks in Barrack Street. There was one that's presently there at the moment, and there was another one up at the top of Barrack Street in a place called Cartridge's Avenue. That was the cavalry barracks. So all those were occupied by the Republicans. But really the lads on the quay were the only ones who were really going to engage in the battle, and sniping and so forth from the positions along the quay. So let's start with the siege. On the day of the siege, on the Tuesday, the GPO was taken over and fortified by the Republicans. About 6:30 p.m. in the evening, a small advance party of Free Staters was spotted on the brow of the hill at Sally Park. Their presence was acknowledged by the Republicans, who fired a sustained burst from Thompson and loose machine guns from the positions in the 2 barracks and the jail and Bilberry Rock. As I said, some of the IRA had gone up there, Bilberry. As a result of this gunfire, the Siege of Waterford claimed its first victim, a Free State volunteer named Costello, who was one of the Free State scouting party. Now the scouting party comprised of about 6 men who, when fired upon, dived for cover. One man was seen to fall. This was volunteer Costello. He was rescued by Captain Edward O'Brien, that's Ned O'Brien, I'll be telling you a lot more about him later on, and Sergeant Murphy, who were operating with the Free State forces. However, volunteer Costello was shot through the lung, fell seriously wounded and died of his wounds on the Thursday morning. Now the Free State forces posted on Mount Misery, as it's called, returned fire. The quay was packed with onlookers, but they didn't seem to panic and rather seemed to enjoy the spectacle. At 5 a.m. on the Wednesday morning, the stillness of the morning was broken by the sound of machine guns as they rattled out from the Republican positions in the jail. Sometimes later, the Free State was seen bringing the 18-pounder gun along the golf links and into position on the rock overlooking the town. This operation was greatly hampered by the devastating fire from the Republican positions. At last, however, the field gun was made ready at about 10:40 a.m. in the morning. and it opened fire. And the first thing it hit was Paddy Paul's mother's house in Barrack Street. Blew the chimney off it. Very soon they had a range anyway, and they opened up some devastating fire. As I said, many houses in Barrack Street were destroyed and their occupants evacuated, as indeed did many in the vicinity of the jail. Now, Tramore was the principal refuge for an awful lot of Waterford City people, and I remember my mother telling me that during the siege of Waterford, her mother brought her out to out around the Skibbereen area, and that's where they stayed. In Barrack Street opposite the infantry barracks, another shell blew a large hole in a house owned by a Mrs. Nolan, and as I said, Paddy Paul's mother house also suffered with the chimney being blown off it. 2 shells landed at the ground of the Ursuline convent but did not do any damage. On Wednesday afternoon, the terrified residents of the Little Sisters of the Poor, that was up in Bunkers Hill, left their residence and walked in procession out to the Ursuline convent, where they remained until the siege had ended. On Wednesday afternoon, machine gun and rifle fire was resumed on an intensified scale, resulting in some fatalities. William Long of Bat Street was shot through the brain in the vicinity of the cathedral down in Barnstrand Street. He was moved up to St Patrick's Hospital, but he was found to be dead on arrival. Later in the day, Joseph Dwan, a native of Port Darlington, was shot at the top of Olive Street, shot dead actually. That was close to the Franciscan Friary. About 5 p.m. on Wednesday evening, the shelling resumed with great intensity and continued on about 9 p.m. This fire was directed mainly at the infantry and artillery barracks, IRA strongholds. The Republicans in the infantry barracks were forced to flee their position and in doing so set the barrack alight. At about 11 p.m, the artillery barracks was evacuated by the Republicans, and again they put the barracks to the torch. The flames from these fires could be seen from miles around, and such was the density of the smoke that it was only with great difficulty that one could negotiate the streets in this area, the visibility being reduced by several feet. After withdrawal of the Republicans from both barracks, crowds rushed in and began to loot the barracks. A mine in the infantry barracks exploded with intense heat, which resulted in 4 casualties. This had the effect of stopping the looting, which ended around midnight. While heavy shells were directed against both barracks in the jail, small arms, machine gun fire and rifle fire was directed by the Free State forces upon the Republican defences along the quay. Such was the intensity of this gunfire that it was impossible to pass any of the roads leading to the quay, especially Kaiser Street, Barnstrand Street, Gladstone Street and Hanover Street. With the fall of darkness on Wednesday night, a body of Free State troops under the command of Captain Mackey, a Clonmel man, crossed the river by boats to the Waterford side. This was apparently anticipated by the Republican forces who set out to intercept them. However, Captain Mackey avoided the main road and instead worked his way along the riverbank. At midnight they halted for about an hour and again started off. About 1:45 in the morning they reached a house about 100 yards at the rear of the County Club. As I said, that's at the back of the present Tower Hotel, where they posted a machine gun to cover the principal windows of the Adelphi Hotel. While a bombing party under the command of Captain O'Brien, that's the local lad Ned O'Brien, advanced towards the County Club with orders to storm the positions if necessary. But they needn't have been too concerned, because when they got in there was no need for storming, because all the Republicans were fast asleep. Ha boo babby bunting. At the gain and entry, the Free State captured the Adelphi garrison in the same Marnes. A similar tactic was used in the capture of the garrison in the Clyde Shipping. That was a building between the Adelphi Hotel and the Imperial Hotel. The Imperial Hotel were flying the Red Cross flag since the beginning of the siege. However, it was claimed that a duplicate of the book was found bearing the heading Column Headquarters. But was it a hospital or was it the headquarters? Who knows? When the Free State troops gained entry to the Imperial Hotel, a number of people were found wearing Red Cross armbands. Having secured the Adelphi end of the quay, the Free State advanced towards Reginald's Tower. However, the Republicans had vacated Reginald's Tower, leaving behind them some arms and ammunition, which included 3 mines which had been sunk outside Reginald's Tower and connected by wire to a position in the Adelphi Hotel. Now, I shudder to think of the consequences had these mines gone off, because instead of having our beautiful Reginald's Tower, we'd be probably looking at a block of flats or something there, or a pile of rubble. On Thursday, July the 20th, the Republican forces still held out at the GPO, the Granville Hotel, the jail and some sniping posts along the quay. At 11:30 AM, the Republican garrisons were given absolution by some Waterford priests. The Free State troops advanced cautiously towards the GPO, this being necessary because of the open ground around the GPO. At one point, a small party of Free State troops got within 20 yards of the GPO, but were driven back by the intensity of gunfire directed at them by the Republican defenders. Having not only to contend with a frontal attack from Free State forces on the quay, the GPO Republicans also had to contend with intense fire from the Free State forces stationed in the flour mills, recently knocked down, and some sheds in that vicinity. Republican fire was returning from positions in the jail and sniping posts in Thomas Hill, Ballybricken and posts along the quay. Between 4 and 5 PM, the 18-pounder gun was brought down from Mount Misery and positioned on the railway line. This manoeuvre was answered by a hail of bullets from the Republican positions. Such was the intensity that the gun crew dived for cover as bullets ricocheted off the gun carriage. The Republican fire then ceased as they had mistakenly believed that the field gun position had been knocked out. However, a gun crew under Gunner Kavanagh lay on the ground and got a line on the post office. They then brought the field gun into action. 6 shells struck the building, that's the GPO, 1 or 2 piercing the solid masonry and exploding inside. The Republican defenders were forced to vacate the upper floor of the GPO and to take cover on the ground floor. One of the GPO defenders was Waterford City man John Bonnie Dial was his nickname, and he was wounded in this engagement and was to die of his wounds some days later on August the 4th. The Republican force then abandoned the GPO, some fleeing to the Granville Hotel, another Republican stronghold, and another couple of shops up in Barnstrand Street they also occupied. The Free State troops then proceeded along the quay to their next target, the Granville Hotel. However, after a barrage of fire having been directed against them, the Republicans were forced to flee this position. A number of Republican forces were captured, 18 in all. Amongst them was the commander of the Republican forces in Waterford, Commandant Jerry Cronin, who had fought alongside Paddy Paul at the Pickerstown ambush. At the Granville Hotel, a mine was discovered attached to an electric battery and was defused. Several hand grenades were also found. After the capture of the Granville Hotel and other places along the quay, operations were suspended for the night. Silence reigned except for some sniping from Republican positions. On Friday morning, July the 21st, the only substantial Republican position was the jail on Ballybricken. Other positions held out were some houses on Ballybricken and Barrack Street, along with a few on the quay. In the afternoon, the Free State troops brought the heavy 18-pounder gun into position on the Ferrybank railway line. This given a very good line of fire for the jail. As they were doing so, the Republicans in the jail opened up a barrage of fire at the 18-pounder. The gun crew were forced to take shelter behind the shield to protect the crew and to allow it to manoeuvre into position. A Lancia car, that's an armour car, drove up in front of them on the railway bridge. And a young Free State soldier named Howlett from Duncannon, County Wexford, mounted a loose gun in the car and returned fire, despite the heavy fire coming from the Republican positions. Alas, the young lad's bravery was not enough to protect him, and finally he was struck in the eye with a bullet that pierced his brain, killing him instantly. With the 18-pounder gun now in position, the crew opened up a deadly effect on the jail. Dense clouds of smoke and dust rose into the air as the shells landed in the centre of the prison. 5 shells in all landed in the jail, but the second shell had the desired effect and the Republicans fled the scene via Chapel Lane, leading to Ballybricken Church. No sooner had the Republicans left the jail when a large number of the locals on Ballybricken and the surrounding lanes into the jail despite the gunfire and shells firing all around, and they looted the place. An old woman told me that she remembers she was only a young one and was over there on Ballybricken looking at the scene, and next thing she got the fright of her life when she saw this table apparently moving on its own, and heading across Ballybricken. 4 or 5 fellas had went into the jail, a huge big long table, they had gotten underneath, supporting it with their backs, and stood up, and off it went, and it looked like the table was moving of its own volition. Having worked their way along the quay, the Free State troops attempted to lower the bridge, which had remained up throughout the siege, and which in fact prolonged the siege because the Free State troops couldn't get across. They tried to lower the bridge, but the Republicans had dismantled part of it. They eventually got it down, and the Free State troops got over the bridge. By 9 p.m. that evening, there was when they got across the bridge, they all held their guns up in the air, the Free State troops, and they fired a long volley in celebration of getting into Waterford City. The remaining Free State troops now entered the city and established their headquarters at the Imperial Hotel, present Tower Hotel. The siege of Waterford had now effectively ended. Amazingly, despite the heavy shelling and intense fire, the siege of Waterford resulted in casualties, but not as many casualties as probably could have happened. Although the siege of Waterford had ended, the War of Brothers did not end until May 1923. Saturday, July the 22nd, saw a resumption of business, normal business all around. Many of the Republicans were interned in jail. Some Kilkenny jail, some in Ballybricken jail. But getting back to Ned O'Brien, a young man, and you have to admire him. He was a Free State soldier. He was only 21 when he was killed. Because of his bravery during the siege of Waterford, he was promoted to a commandant. And in August of 1922, there was a bit of a commotion on Barrack Street, and he came out of the barracks on Barrack Street and with another soldier and went down to see what the commotion was, and he was shot and killed. To the best of my knowledge, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, I think he's buried out close to the Republican plot out in Ballygunner. He's not in the Republican plot, and probably that's the way it should be, because they fought for different ideals. The Republicans fought for a 32 county republic. Now, I don't know, was a 32 county republic ever achievable? Perhaps it was. Collins didn't think so. De Valera, I'm not convinced that De Valera thought that a 32 county republic was achievable either. However, you know, in the 26th county, the legacy of the treaty is that we were a 26 county unit that got on reasonably well after a long, long time of poverty. However, in the north of Ireland, the legacy of the treaty is you had a nationalist population up there who were oppressed because of their religion, because of their nationality. They got the worst jobs, they got the worst housing. And remember, the troubles in the north didn't start because of anything over the nationalists looking for human rights is all they were looking for. They were looking for a decent house, a decent job, to be respected for their religion. And that was the legacy of the treaty for those people. But to finish with a humorous story, when I was doing my book in 1992, I was researching Waterford songs. And I'd like to respect both sides of the argument of the treaty. I spoke to an old Republican friend of mine, an old man at that time, and I said to him, Michael, I said, did you ever hear, I said, a Free State song? I said, I'm after getting hundreds of Republican songs, but I can't find a Free State song. And he turned to me and looked at me with a very serious face and said, maybe they had nothing to sing about, boy. That's the way he felt. Well, I do hope you enjoyed the little talk on our tragic civil war, and indeed it was tragic, and should never be forgotten. And again, as I say, there were two sides to it. And, you know, I think it should always remain. We should always respect the people on both sides for the positions they took. Don't lump them together. That is to invalidate either side's argument. To say to a Republican, a man who's buried out in Ballygunner, or whose memorial is in some lane like John O'Rourke out by the Holy Cross, who was killed in 1921. Those men who were killed out in Pickettstown, they fought. for a 32 county Ireland. The Free State lads believed that this is our chance, as Colin said. It's a stepping stone. We must respect that. Respect them all, but respect them individually and separately. Talk to you in the next little story. That's if the lockdown is not over today. Take care, see ya.
Over the building the tricolour flies, its soft folds kissing the summer skies. The doors are barred and the sandbags laid, whilst few and short are the words that are said. Over the city the rifles crack, while mountain misery's height re-echoes back. Thus we wait for the evening's glow, for the fight to begin in the GPO.